Oh, shit. There's no escaping now, my friend.
I'm stuck.
Welcome.
Oh, man.
It's really good to have you, Robert.
Rod.
What?
Rod.
What do you mean?
My name's Rod.
Oh, yeah. Rob, sorry. So I've been really looking forward to this conversation, to be able to have an opportunity to speak to one of the Menendez brothers. It's really like, it's incredible. But a real quick question. How did your parents taste?
Not so good. High cholesterol, just too much medication.
Well, you look like you've, handled things pretty well, Rob.
Yeah. The good thing is that it didn't affect my gut. I don't know what you've been eating, but you gotta take care of that, dude.
What are you trying to say, man? Fat is in. Damn it.
Yourself that.
But in all seriousness, welcome to the show.
Yeah.
For the second time.
What is this, like the 50?
Rod the God. Roddy Rod. That's what I literally have you in my phone as. Do you know that?
Really?
Rod the God.
Huh.
That gangster?
Love it.
Let's get a confirmation of what episode this is. Please hold. Sorry, my computer is works like my brain, very slow. All right, let's see. Rodrigo, you were initially episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
No fucking way.
53.
This is episode 53.
Nice.
Accidentally, dude. It was not planned. The funny thing is you were supposed to come on a couple episodes ago and we had to reschedule.
Yes.
So
correct.
The universe made it so that you were exactly 50 episodes later.
Right.
So we'll have to continue that as the...
All right, so 63 would be the next.
Right, exactly. Right. I could see math is your strong suit.
Yeah. Well, one of them.
Rod, it would be 103.
That'd be awesome. Wait, but I mean like every 10th episode?
No, right now you're every 50th episode.
Oh, okay.
You see what I'm saying?
I got you.
You did episode 3, now you're doing 53, so then you would do 103.
Gotcha. All right.
Cool. So I just got to crank them out and I'll get you back on here in no time.
Perfect.
Well, let's have our own conversation first.
Let's do it.
I see you got all sorts of goods with you.
Yeah, I got a few books on me, some stuff I want to share.
Yeah.
One of your favorite topics is different kind of conspiracies, different spiritual aspects, all that stuff. So you love all that, right?
I do.
So I got a few books, a few philosophies, a little bit of spiritual history, biblical history, Masonic history. So
I just think that in this world that we live in, there's so many unanswered questions about the origins of man, of the religion, of the occult.
Right.
I've been learning a lot more about the potentiality of some of the beginnings of religions being seated in psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
There's this book. It's called... It's escaping me. I'll look it up on my phone in a second. But it talks about Christianity being like there was... Okay, so they had these vats that they kept wine in, right? Mm-hmm. And in those vats, they were able to scrape off the inside and find something called ergot. Mm-hmm. Ergot is what they initially isolated LSD out of.
Right.
So they realized that in these wines, wine wasn't just grapes. It was a combination of all sorts of other psychedelic entities, properties. And if I ever thought that I had talked to God, it probably would have been during a psychedelic experience or even a highly induced marijuana experience.
Right.
Do you have any opinion on how chemical compounds could have been at the beginning of our understandings of communicating with a higher power?
Absolutely. So you have a couple of stories. First of all, when Abraham with the burning bush, he saw God in the burning bush that clearly was some kind of herb that was burning, and turns out there's certain parts in the desert where you could just throw a simple rock in it and the dirt is actually flammable. So it could have caught simply a simple spark could have caught the bush on fire, right? Whatever that plant was, it doesn't stay.
There is a theory. There was these Israeli scientists, and their theory is that it's the acacia bush,
Right.
which is rich in DMT.
Right.
So that he was having a DMT trip
Yeah.
when that happened.
Yep.
And that's a theory.
And the other one is Apollo's temple. You know you have the high priestess of Apollo, right? You would come into Delphi or Delphi, however you want to say it. You have two different, in English it would be Delphi. So you would come into there, she would prophesize your future, and she would be standing in this place. They built a temple specifically in this place where the fumes of the earth would rise up, and she would get high off of it, and she would have visions, and she would tell you all these things, predict your future.
No shit.
Yeah, so that's one way. And people took it as literally the god Apollo was talking to her.
Right.
God, Apollo is one of his things as a god he's the god of the prophecy. God of prophecy. So
Apollo, am I getting this wrong? The god of the sun also? Sun god?
He's the patron of the sun. He's the god of music, the god of the arts. He's also god of medicine.
So one thing you were talking to me earlier about is the translating of the Old Testament, that the word Adonai, I think Adonai,
Elohim.
Elohim, is the Yiddish or the Jewish Hebrew word for God,
Right.
but it seems like it's translated to plural.
So it's funny. That's a really fun one for me because it actually derives from the Canaanites. They used to have their own Parthenon as well, different gods, and the main god was El or Elo, the main god. From there you have different gods as well. And one of them, they were all called the Elohim, and the Elohim just means the many, the whole group. So when you get to Genesis, you literally translate from Hebrew, and I have this Bible right here. It's written half it's Hebrew and the other half is in English, and they tell you how they came up with that translation,
Right.
which is really awesome. I'll show you if you can show it on camera.
Yeah.
And it does not say in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It does not say it. It says in the beginning Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And then when you get only a couple verses later in the same chapter, chapter 1, the very first chapter of Genesis, right? Verse 26, and I'm quoting exactly what it says, "Let us make mankind in our image." It doesn't say God created mankind in his image. It says God is talking to somebody. Clearly, he's speaking to somebody. He says, "Now let us make mankind in our image."
Like there were many, plural.
Yeah.
There were,
But doesn't say God. It says Elohim. Then Elohim said, "Let us make mankind in our image."
and that is a plural for
Yeah.
gods.
Yeah.
And it's like the grand engineers almost.
Yes,
Right.
correct.
There's this movie called Prometheus.
Yeah.
You know of this
Oh,
movie.
yeah.
Well, it starts off with this like Hulk like Adonis looking alien human like creature, super muscular, strong, and then spoiler alert, but it comes to find out that they created us in their image, and which is often said, right? Like God created us in their image.
Right.
And it just interesting that the original text is like inferring that it was plural.
Right. Yeah, and it's really interesting because we're talking later on a story. Hold on. It is the book. I have it all written down because I still need my notes. But it's the book of Daniel in chapter 3, verse 25 to be exact. I even actually, yeah, it says that so the story goes, the king is has 3 men that they don't believe in these gods, so the king is gonna persecute them by pretty much burning them alive, right? And it's like super hot, like furnace, and just throw them in there, and they're gonna burn. Anyway, when it cooled down, everything, there's smoke, all the whatnot. Instead of 3 men coming out, he sees that the 3 men are still alive, and there's a 4th man with them. And the passage literally says the man looks like the son of gods. Now, that's a really interesting thing because most Bibles were translated as the son of God, right? And mind you, this is the Old Testament. So Christians will automatically say, hey, this is Jesus. However, what I find very interesting is that in Hebrew, it says Elohim and there's a particle for an S. So you can either translate it as Elohim and S, which is really interesting, but it's kind of hard to translate that to English. So it is a plural. And the best way I can do it, you know what? I encourage everyone to go on Bible Hub, look at the interlinear Bible.
This is a website.
Yes.
Like BibleHub.com.
Yes.
All right.
And either .org.com, just
Okay.
Google Bible Hub and you'll
Yeah.
find it. And search for the interlinear Bible and Google the whole chapter of chapter 3 of Daniel, right? And read the whole thing. And the very, very end of that chapter, literally, it's the last thing that says, it looked like the men of gods, right? And it would translate it for you, and you will see. However, if you read the King James Version or other modern versions, it just says the Son of God. And it completely took out the whole pluralism of it.
I think it's so interesting that this foundation of religion that our world has been really built on has been left to man's translation of it.
Yeah.
Right. And how, you know that game of telephone
Yes.
where you like turn to your friend, you whisper something in their ear and it goes around the circle. And when it gets back, it's like completely different. And you don't know if that's caused from somebody trying to be silly and changing some of the words, or sometimes people hear things the way they want to hear them.
Right.
Right. And we're talking about thousands of years of information, you know, like the rewriting of the Bible. What is that about? Why, at what point did somebody say the word of God needed to be changed?
So, and that's where the Muslims come in, and they got the Quran because they wanted to, their prophet literally wanted to write a book that the word cannot be changed, that it will stay true to its core. Like it would never be retranslated, changed, nothing, right? Because that was one of the issues the Prophet Muhammad had with the Bible, was exactly that it's been translated so many times. You have to consider that it was written, the Old Testament is written in Hebrew and the New Testament is written in Greek. It's easier to translate Greek to Latin and then to English, right? But it is harder to translate Hebrew to Latin and then English because Hebrew is a whole complete different language, a whole different background, dialect, everything. You know, even English derives from older Latin languages as well. We still have some old Latin languages or words in our language. But when it comes to Hebrew, it's a whole complete different content. Like, so at this point, you know, Hebrew is one of those languages that one sentence can mean different things.
Right.
So translating that to English
is challenging. And I'm sure there's been a lot of things lost in translation. Let me ask you this. I don't know you to be like particularly like following one specific religion. Maybe you do, but you have an interest in many religions. What sparks that for you? What is it that calls you to learn about the Word of God in so many different writings?
I think for me, it has to do with a lot of trauma in the Christian faith, you know, and just how do you say? When I was a kid, I went to Catholic school. That's where my parents would send me, a private Catholic school, and I just remember being left-handed, and my teacher complained to my mom that being left-handed is not a good thing. You know, they consider anything left-handed evil, the left-hand path, satanic, and all that stuff. So, of course, my mom started kind of being a little bit strict on me, being a little harsh, you know, and that's the best way I can explain it.
Really?
You know, with me trying to get me to switch for me to write with my right hand. So, at that point, it's like, wait a minute. So, it starts with that. Then in high school, I became an evangelical Christian. And there was a lot of things I was trying to question, and it was always like, no, shunning me aside.
Yeah.
So, when I became 23 years old, I graduated from college, I decided to join the Freemasons. And I wanted to join the Freemasons because I wanted to see what kind of knowledge they had to offer. I was never big into the conspiracies and stuff like that. So, you know, now I just understood that they had interesting spiritual or esoteric knowledge that I wanted to get my hands on. And I learned so much from a few brothers. And I would like to share this one with you, is the book of Genesis, you know, when Adam and Eve, you know, it's a really neat allegory. It just represents how humans grow and they adapt, and once they learn something, you cannot unlearn it. And that's what the apple really represents. You know, the snake was the one that convinced Eve to eat it. The snake sheds the skin. You know, there's so much unique meaning in there, right? So one of the things is, once you realize you can cultivate your own food, you can grow your own food, you don't go back to just picking the fruits off the tree and waiting for the right season. Now you're like, well, hey, you know what? I can grow my own food. You get cold. Well, hey, you know what? Animal fur is really good for warming you. So you realize you're naked. Now you realize you're naked, and now you're wearing fur. So you know you continue. So you never go back to that whole idea of the perfect Garden of Eden, because now you have to work for it.
Right.
So that's the whole allegorical part of that.
So with the Masonic Brotherhood, so there's so much. What's the word I'm looking for? There's so much, not like conspiracy, and everybody's, when you say Freemason, like, immediately you start thinking about the Illuminati, which I'm
Right.
fascinated in the idea that there's a group of elites that pull the strings in the world and maybe even have some sort of satanic undertones. But you were in the trenches, for lack of better terms, in the Masonic Brotherhood. Are there any like secrets that you have that not that for you to share now, but that like you wish you never knew, or that or was it more of a traditional brotherhood? I mean, you think there's any fact in some of these conspiracies?
There's definitely, definitely do believe everything derives from something, right? There's always some kind of origin of why something's being told. For me, the Illuminati, it did start in the 1700s. However, it was shunned because it was illegal to have any secret societies at that time, and Freemasons kind of got the better hand. They were okay. They were grandfathered in, so they weren't illegalized. They could continue their practices. However, if you go to different countries, there were some that were illegal. If you were a Freemason, you can get executed. It's still 1700s, 1800s. You can still get executed.
Almost
right?
like the witch burning.
Yeah, yeah. So then these are conversations we talk among ourselves in the lodge. Is the Illuminati real? We think there are forms of the Illuminati, but the original Illuminati got destroyed completely in the 1700s. Now, what we do think is just there's people running, the banks, the big guys, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, all these
Leaders of
guys.
industry.
Yeah, these guys are literally running everything, the economy, all of that. So when you talk about the elites controlling everything, yeah, I think they're controlling the economy, how people live, all that.
Also the
media.
dissemination of information, like
Yeah.
the media.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that they have choice in the information that they take in, but if you like follow up the chain, you realize it's a small group of people who are controlling all of these media outlets. And then a lot of people don't understand that those people potentially meet at a table together
Exactly.
to discuss what's going to be covered, how it's going to be covered. Because there's the book, The 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah.
One of them is divide and conquer. To control a mass people, like you have to pit them against each other. And you can't help but think when you're watching Fox News or CNN, like,
Oh, yeah.
this is like intentionally to get us to disagree with our neighbor.
Exactly.
You
mean, we know psychologically speaking, commercials are designed to entice you to go. If you see a McDonald's commercial, you get hungry, or if you see a new action figure or something, advertisements, we see ads everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're constantly getting our attention. Hey, spend money on this, spend money on that. That's how they keep us,
Right.
from really growing, because then we get distracted. We're on the way, we have a route, and all of a sudden we get distracted by something. Now we're going this way instead of keeping going straight. So, but I want to. So one fun thing. All right. So, and then during the Civil War, there was gold that disappeared, right? And these treasure hunters, and I loved it because this was on a History Channel, and it's this. You can Google it's the Civil War gold. You can literally search it on YouTube, and it's so fascinating because the whole thing was the conspiracy that the Freemasons were involved, right? And I loved it because when they finally spoke with a Freemason, the guy literally what he said was brilliant. He said, "Okay, let's put it this way: let's say you and I are Freemasons, right? Right? And I come up to you and I say, hey, Blake, there's this amazing treasure. We can go try to find it and let's hide it, and we can split it between the two of us and blah, blah. And we become rich and all of a sudden we're building banks, whatever, right? Now, let's say a third person joins and that person is not a Freemason, right? Just because two Freemasons were involved, they're going to say, oh, the Freemasons did this. It just happened to be that the two people that were involved happen to also be Freemasons. But then their other brothers don't know nothing about it. They're not a part of it. They're just like, So that's where the whole thing of like, oh, the Freemasons did this. It just happens to be that whoever did something or some kind of tyranny or something happened to be part of the Skull and Bones or, something like that.
Almost like not all Freemasons are in the Illuminati, but most of the people in the Illuminati happen to be Freemasons.
Not necessarily. And what I'm saying is just because somebody, let's say the Illuminati is real, just because you're in the Illuminati doesn't mean you're part of whatever your own fraternal brothers planning, etc., etc. You get my gist? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's not. You can't conflate Freemasonry with the people who rule the world, because there's probably hundreds or thousands of Freemasons that are
Just living their lives.
exactly. Well, there's this one thing. This tidbit here: strange history of Masons in America. It just so happens that George Washington was not alone among the founders. It says here some scholars say as many as 21 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons.
I know 9 of them were Freemasons, but not all of them were Freemasons.
Among our country's early Masonic leaders were founding fathers George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Paul Revere, and John Hancock.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that, you wonder if that's not because the Freemasons wanted to take over the world, but because there were a group of people who were collectively together through the Masonic Brotherhood, who saw maybe a better way in a government controlled by the people.
Right. So a fun little history on that one. So George Washington, right? This is something that was known amongst Freemasons. He used to recruit his soldiers to join the Freemasons because he believed that they would fight harder and protect each other in the battlefield, right? So it's more of a loyalty thing. I would trust a brother more, a Freemason brother, to do some kind of business or something like that, because we are binded by the law of Freemasons, the Masonic code, literally we call it our obligation, right? Not to screw each other over, not to lie to each other, be honest with each other, right? So there's a certain integrity that we have to follow.
So it's like, it's a good backbone to have if you're going to be putting together a group of people to, control a government or create a government, should I say. Another thing that I think about, like when you hear the word Mason, you think of a bricklayer, right? That's like the trade of being a Mason. And if you were to go back throughout history and you look at like the pyramids, right? This is like the earliest of quote unquote bricklaying that we know. There's also this pyramid imagery that's associated with the Illuminati. There's also that same imagery on our money signs, on our dollars, right? It just seems like either it's all a very strange coincidence, or there's, we're talking about thousands of years of tradition that just so happen to show up in some of the imagery that we see today.
Yep.
I
mean, we have a lot of Christian religious things in our constitution, in our laws. They're mostly followed by Christian beliefs.
Yes.
So yeah, you have a lot of tradition affecting our laws, being a part of it. So it's really interesting. You talked about the pyramid. The pyramid simply represents the all-seeing eye, right? So it's pretty much God's eye. He sees everything. God sees it all. So it's kind of like the government saying, "Hey, we see it all." What's his name? Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm familiar with Uncle Sam. He's got his hands in everything.
Yeah.
Have you heard the theory about aliens potentially manipulating the DNA of lower hominids, and that we could be like an alien experiment?
Descendants of like all these experiments. Yeah. I mean, the whole missing link between Homo sapiens and all the previous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our mind exploded in size, the size of our brain, over a couple million years, which evolutionary wise is like impossible. So some theorize that that maybe there was a intervention by extraterrestrials, and we also don't understand how these pyramids were built. Like, and they're all over the world.
They're so unique, right? Like the whole I think we talked about on our last podcast, a guy down in
the castle that he built?
Yeah, he was a Mason, and when they asked him how he did it, he said he knew the secrets of the pyramid, right? So that was the only thing. However, there are a lot of conspiracies around it, and a lot of stuff has been debunked when they talked about how, like, nobody saw any construction workers, etc., etc. You know, that's what the newspaper wanted to put out, because hey, it's really cool, whatever. But there are records of people who lived around the area clearly seeing trucks and workers coming in at night to help build, you know. And one so I'm trying to think like how far I can say this, but one of the things about Freemasons is the teaching of the building of King Solomon's temple. And in the Bible it talks about how like they never heard any construction, like people never heard construction, and it just happened to one day just little by little build up, but nobody
Yeah.
heard construction. And it does go, we go into that whole conversation, we go into that teaching in the lodge, and it's really fascinating. I'm trying to think like if I'm able to say or speak of it. But it's very logical. Like literally it's mind blowing. It's like, oh, I can't believe I didn't even think about that. And it's so common. And it sucks because I would love to kind of say, because I think it's something very unique. It's a beautiful philosophy and a beautiful allegory, and sometimes I wonder if I'm binded by the teachings that I'm not allowed to say, you know. So
This is the shit we want to know, Rod.
yeah, I know.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and this is
Just
the
you
part
and me here. It's just us.
and people watching.
And our friends in the interwebs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other strange thing that happens with some of these pyramids is the sacrifices that happen after they're built. Like there's some monuments in South America that there's like archaeologists have said that after they were built, there could have been like hundreds of thousands of people that were sacrificed afterwards.
Right.
What do you think the
movie
fascination
Apocalypto?
with like the movie Apocalypto? Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think the fascination was in these early people of sacrificing humans to the gods?
You know, that was such a fascinating thing to me. I don't know what would go into their minds, but even in the Bible you have sacrifices. I mean, Jesus being the ultimate sacrifice, you know, and all of a sudden everyone's clear from sin, right? All you have to do is repent, right? But before that, you had to sacrifice a lamb, and you had to do this specific ritual, like a 7-day ritual or something like that, right? I mean, when Abraham was about to kill his son because God tells him to, that was technically would have been a human sacrifice, and then God says, no, stop. Instead, sacrifice that lamb, and sacrifice it. So what's the fascination with sacrifice? Well, we know for sure, there's a few ways we can look at it. Blood is life, right? Blood it's sacred. Your blood is unique to you, and my blood is unique to me, right? So it is what makes me. My blood, what runs in my veins is my whole generation of my ancestors. You know, all that DNA, all that sacred knowledge that has been passed down. Who I become now versus my ancestor, et cetera, right? Also, the whole idea that the ultimate blood, even though you and I are separate, technically we all derive from like one ultimate source. So so that's why blood is so unique. So when we're talking about sacrifices, we're literally in a sense giving a form of life to the gods, right? It's like this is like the ultimate sacrifice, life, because everybody wants to live, everybody wants to. You have a lot of in the Inca traditions as well. A lot of a beautiful woman, virgin, would be sacrificed to the gods, and she would be executed, right, to appeal the gods so they can grow crops and all that whatnot. And they would willingly be happy to do it. It wasn't even like, oh no, I don't want. No, they were like, I can't wait to finally die for the gods because this is my calling, and so that's
Kind of
really,
like the kamikaze mindset.
yeah.
Like there were some people who were less. It wasn't like brutal murder. These people they knew what they were getting involved in, and they potentially were honored to be a sacrifice.
Yep. I mean, even Jesus, when he passes down the wine, he says, "This is my blood, that is life." So it was sacred blood. This is the blood of the actual Son of God. But nonetheless, blood is very. I mean, we can take it as far as people wanting to keep the bloodline pure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very important thing to mankind. You wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for your blood running
Well,
through your
I've
veins.
talked about, when we talk about life after death, and I've talked to Devin, our friend Devin Noel, on the podcast about, we don't really know where we go when we die. And there's all sorts of different theories, and certain religions have come up with their thoughts on it for different reasons, but our DNA, right, and our genes, like that's passed on. That's passed on through our seed, And like what you're talking about in the blood, and when you talk about your ancestors, that to me just, I don't know, it's just mind blowing that the same blood that's running through you was running through your ancestors hundreds, thousands of years ago. So I understand what you're saying with the significance of sacrificing the blood. It's just so crazy to think of the brutal times that we've come from, a lot of times in the name of religion.
Yep. It's a fun one for me. When people tell me, "Oh, I have a book here on planetary magic," right? And of course, I love to get into the different esoteric origins of that because they represent certain deities, etc., etc. And I've been told a few times, different people, how, oh, you shouldn't be worshiping those gods because humans were sacrificed, they were brutal, blah blah blah. And then I see them dancing to the moon. And the moon was one of the biggest planets people used to sacrifice humans to.
Yeah.
Specifically, there's a reason why it's called a blood moon. Why the red moon is called a blood moon.
No shit.
You know?
Wild. I mean, we've got moon imagery all throughout here.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, we see a full moon. We see when the moon turns red, we get so fascinated, so beautiful. We're technically worshiping it in a way. But there's so much history of literally humans being sacrificed to it as well. You know, for whatever reasons, whatever you may be worshiping to the goddess Hecate, who knows? You know?
What do you think is the significance of people acting a little funny during a full moon? I've talked to people who work in the emergency room.
Right.
And they say they'll get to work and they'll be like, oh man, it's a full moon. Like, it's not even like a myth. Like, they notice that during a full moon, shit gets crazy. Do you think there's something to that?
So, in the 1800s, there was I'm trying to remember the name of the psychologist. This is like when psychology was really kicking in. People who were put in an asylum, they were called lunatics for a reason, because he believed that,
oh my gosh,
that when there was the moon, like, emphasized their behavior, all of that.
I want to look up origin of lunatic.
Yeah. But yeah, Luna, that's literally the moon.
I never even put those two together. So the origin, Latin luna for moon, late Latin lunaticus, Old French lunatique, and then to lunatic. Middle English from Old French language, from the moon, from belief that changes of the moon caused intermittent insanity.
Yep.
Holy shit.
Did this tell you who was the psychologist to come up with that
idea? The term
idea?
lunatic derives from the Latin word
or maybe derives from like ancient, like the ancients, and there was a therapist that like did research on that. And
that is crazy. This is on Wikipedia here. Lunatic is an antiquated term referring to a person who is seen as mentally ill, dangerous, foolish, or crazy. Conditions once attributed to lunacy. The word derives from lunaticus, meaning of the moon or moonstruck. Man, I've never put the two of those together. The horoscope of a lunatic, according to an astrologer, who describes how the positions of the planets Saturn and Mars with the respect of the moon are the causes of diseases of the mind. I'm trying to find, this says in the King James Version of the Bible here, is diseases thought to be caused by the moon. The King James Version of the Bible's records lunatic in the Gospel of Matthew, which has been interpreted as a reference to epilepsy. By the 4th and 5th centuries, astrologers were commonly using the term to refer to neurological and psychiatric diseases. Philosophers such as Aristotle, Pliny the Elder argued that the full moon induced insane individuals with bipolar disorder by providing light during nights which would otherwise have been dark, and affecting susceptible individuals through the well-known route of sleep deprivation. Interesting. It's saying here that during a full moon, it's brighter outside. Before we had lights, so people would stay up all night, create like what did they say?
And of course, when you
deprivation.
when you start lacking sleep, your brain starts thinking. Yep.
You'll hallucinate.
Yep.
That's another thing I'm fascinated with is sleep. Is our need that to check out every day for 8 hours, right? If you don't, you'll literally go crazy. You'll get sick, right? But if you think like for evolutionary purposes and survival of the fittest, having to go unconscious for 8 hours is not like conducive to survival, but we all have to do it.
Even animals,
Yeah.
even sharks sleep and they just keep swimming.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I haven't done much research on sleep, so I can't really speak on that subject too much. But it has always fascinated me how literally we need to, like you said, for survival purposes, how do we do it? And we're talking about ages ago when we didn't have maybe,
Shelter.
yeah,
Yeah. Or
we
somebody
slept
to
in
watch.
caves.
Yeah, slept in caves. And even like, so if you think about cats, they say cats sleep like 18 hours a day. Like they're mostly checked out,
Right.
you know? And when we sleep, it's also known that our body releases DMT, dimethyltryptamine, which is like what's in ayahuasca
Right.
and what we're talking about, the acacia bush. So it's like every night we go on a psychedelic journey that is required for our body to recharge. You know, it fascinates me.
Right. Yeah, it is really intriguing. I mean, even when you think about sleep paralysis, how you hallucinate, people see things, they see demons, or whatever they're afraid of, they see it, and it comes from the fear of the fact that your brain is awake but your body's asleep.
Yeah.
So that means technically you're in between both worlds, the sleep world and the awakened world, right? So your brain is still in a way dreaming while it's also awake at the same time. So you're kind of hallucinating and you're seeing things and you're freaking out because you can't move your body, you're panicking, you're probably seeing things that scare you or terrify you, and your brain starts to make up all these things, so that's another fun one for me.
So when we say hallucinate or a brain starts to make things up, how much of that is hallucination and it's like creating things that don't exist, and how much of it is tapping into a parallel realm? I have an interesting story on this. I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before. I've talked to you about it. So Danielle and I sadly lost a pregnancy a few years ago. Danielle had, thank you, man, had an ectopic pregnancy, which is when the baby starts growing in the fallopian tube, and she had to have emergency surgery to have that removed.
Right.
That surgery, unfortunately, gave her a staph infection in her blood, and she fought for her life in front of me in the ICU. The second night she was in the ICU, she was eyes closed, laying in the hospital bed, talking to somebody in the room, right? And it's all good. It's part of it, man. Dolce, shout out to Dolce downstairs. She'll always let her presence be known. Yeah. She starts talking to people in the room. And I think, she's on some pain meds, like she's, out of it. She asks me to get them to leave. Mind you, her eyes are closed the whole time. So I have this thought of like, okay, I'm either going to tell my wife, there's nobody here, baby, or let me just go along with this to give her some comfort. So I go with that. And I'm like, all right, come on now, everybody out. And she like sits back in her seat in her bed. And then she turns her head to the wall next to her with her eyes closed and makes this really ugly face. And she's like, and you, like she's looking at the ugliest, scariest one of them. I'm like, you too, buddy, go on out now. What I skipped over is that when she was talking to these, whatever she was talking to, she was saying something along the lines of, I'm not getting on the bus. I don't have a ticket. And then funnily enough, she's like, I don't do public transportation. Which he would never say that in real life, whatever. And she's like saying things like, what kind of place is this for a bus stop? The next day, she told me she had a dream that there were demons in the room with her. And I said, babe, do you not remember like what happened? And she didn't. And I explained it to her. And if I wouldn't have seen it with my own eyes, it'd be hard for me to believe. But I feel like I witnessed my wife talking to entities that were trying to get them to go with her and pass on. There's another part of this story that I don't know if I told you yet. About a week ago, my wife's friend posted on social media that she had almost died and she was in the ICU at the same hospital, and says, and I want you to know, I'm glad to be alive, but I've seen the devil. The devil is real. my wife said she got chills all over her body and messaged her. And she said, did you see something in the ICU at this hospital? And the girl messaged back, like, I'm literally crying right now. Yes, I did. Apparently, this girl saw the same shit.
Wow.
And if you were to think about it, in the ICU, it's like where people are incredibly injured, incredibly sick, not ready to die.
Right.
Right? And if there was a place where spirits would stay stuck, it would be in a place like that.
Right.
So I know it's a long story. It's hard to wrap your mind around, but I feel like when we talk about tapping into other dimensions, whether through hallucination, like, was my wife hallucinating? Is it weird that another girl had a similar hallucination, or is there another realms that we can't see to the human eye?
Right.
But when we get tired enough, or we take a certain substance, you're able to
Right.
shed like the way we see the world and
Right.
start seeing these other entities.
Blake, first of all, I'm very happy that Danielle is here with us today. Like,
Thank you. Me
I'm
too.
blessed to have met the two of you, and you two built all this. So, this is awesome. I'm happy that she's okay.
Thank you, brother.
Second, it's really hard for me to talk about these things because I try to be very skeptical. Usually when people talk to me about something, want to share with me, I always take everything with a grain of salt. Literally,
Yeah.
I try not to think of it too much, and I'll look into it myself if I care enough, or not, then I let it be. But the thing is that, and that's because of what I do. I love to teach the occult, all these esoteric teachings, but I always encourage people to learn on their own as well and do their own research, right? Not just take whatever anybody tells you, right? But the thing is that sometimes things happen to the individual human that they can't explain, and I would like to share a story too. It's exactly that. When I was young, maybe 5 years old, it was the first time I experienced what people call astral projection, right? And I remember I got out of my body and I flew into a whole different reality. And since there, I've been trying to get back into that reality. I left it, I forgot about it, years went on, and right after my first divorce, when I was going through a separation, I was going through a very depressive state. So I told myself, well, let me find something, some kind of knowledge, something that will help me, expand my mind. And I met a teacher, and the first thing I asked him was, can you teach me how to astral project? I wanted to astral project for the wrong reasons. I wanted to find somebody that I was very in love with, right? But maybe not in love, obsessed with, whatever. I'd rather not say in love.
Fine line, right?
Yeah. And I wanted to talk to that person because something, there was a whole drama, which I'm not going to get into.
Yeah.
And the teacher said, I will teach you, but you're literally without him knowing me, he literally tells me, but you're learning how to astral project for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
But I will teach you because eventually you're going to figure out that never really matters, right? That thing that you're trying to do. So he started teaching me, and literally two classes later, he started teaching me other things because I kept asking questions. And by the 10th lesson, and mind you, it was $100 per class, and I wanted to do it, so I was like really dedicated. Literally by the 10th class, he said, it's funny that you came here to asking me to teach you how to astral project, but you started learning all these awesome, like, different philosophies, ideas, like, and that was really nice. But I kept practicing every day how to astral project. One day, I was still with my ex-wife. Mind you, we're going through a whole separation phase. We're still sleeping in the same bed together, And literally, at that time, I was living with my parents, and we hear my dad's dog bark, right? And I wake up, and I'm annoyed. I'm pissed off. Like, why the fuck is this dog barking? Well, I get up, I go outside, I open the door, and I see the dog literally outside. Like, it's like, wait, did my dad leave the dog outside? Like, what the fuck? Like, what if he runs away? Whatever. And I'm trying to tell the dog, get back in. And the dog's not even listening to me. He's not even staring at me, not even paying attention to me. And I'm just like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Excuse my language. I'm sorry, I don't want to get you wrong.
You can fucking curse on here, man.
Perfect. So at that point, it was just off that the dog wasn't listening to me, and all of a sudden, I'm looking around, and it's the house. I see my hands, everything, but I'm seeing everything vibrating. The walls, everything. It's like a weird grainy vibration, but the colors are sticking out at the same time. It was really weird. And at that point is when I realized, I'm like, oh my God, I got out of my body. And I'm walking around, and I can feel the cold floor under my feet. I can feel things, right? And I started touching the walls because it was so fascinating. But I knew I wasn't really sleeping. Now you know you're gonna ask me, how did you really know? Blah, blah. Well, here's what happened. I started feeling this burning sensation on my rib. It was burning to the point that I started to float. And when I started to float, it was burning so bad that I got pulled back into my bedroom really fast, only to wake up. My wife had leaned over and she put her hand on my rib. And it was like, I guess the sensation was so extreme in that other reality that it was like really disturbing, right? At that point, that's when I realized astral projection is real. Well, guess what happened? I went to sleep. I woke up in the morning and I said, wait a minute. What if the dog's really outside?
Yeah.
I got up and yeah, my dad had left the dog the previous night outside and he was waiting outside the door the whole entire time.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
So explain for those of us who don't know, what is exactly astral projection?
So there's a book called Soul Flight. I really encourage people to try to read it. And the author describes it in many ways because there's not a one exact way to explain it. You know, old beliefs is your soul leaves your body. But this author, I like the explanation better, is your consciousness is really your soul, right? And we'll get into alchemy if you want to get into alchemy
Yeah.
about that as well. But it's you just pretty much throwing your consciousness out into the everything, into existence, the universe.
So
where
it's an intentional out of body experience.
it's not always intentional. Sometimes it's accidental.
Right.
Right. So it's just your conscious now is flying out there, right? And your consciousness knows what it's like to have fingers, legs, all that stuff, right? So it creates a physical body in a sense, right? But it's not real. Technically, it's not real. So that's one way to explain it.
Yeah.
Right. And some of the best practices, always to do it like around 3 a.m. in the REM state. If you can wake your brain up while your body's still asleep, that's where the whole sleep paralysis come in. The best thing to do, and it is the scariest thing because it always happens. You hear voices, you know, you're scared because you don't know what's right there next to you. Something, and if you live by yourself and you hearing somebody standing next to you, it's scary, right? If you can overcome that fear, my technique is next time you get sleep paralysis, if you can overcome the fear, try to roll your head out, your brain out. It's hard to explain. Let's say you're laying there, right? And you can't move. Instead of rolling your body, just try to roll your brain out. And that's how I always fall out. The few times that I experienced that I've fallen out and I see my body and I'm like, oh, and all of a sudden whatever was standing next to me is gone. There's so many forums that talk about this. Let's talk about the devil. One of my favorite ones is this guy astral projected and he went to what we consider to be hell. Hell is human creation, right? So we imagine it as a fiery place where people are getting tortured. And even though he was in there, he saw souls, people that are dead, suffering. And he literally looked and he said, you know, if these people were aware enough, they would know that they can act. This is all a part of their imagination. They can leave it. They have the control, the free will to leave it. But they were so binded by some sort of belief that it took them there, whether it's some sort of guilt that they went through or something that they cannot forgive themselves for. And they felt like that's the place they got to go. But if they can overcome that, they'll realize that, hey, it's just something you created with your own consciousness, your own mind, right? Whatever you know, the whole term as above, so below, whatever you create in the other world eventually becomes your reality. That's where all that whole thing comes.
So I've often thought that hell, the depiction of hell in Christianity, was a way to scare people into living a life of righteousness.
Yeah, because there's no hell in the Bible. It's called Sheol, and Sheol is just a place for the fallen angels to go. If you read the book of Enoch, that's where God sends all the archangels that disobeyed him, and literally that's where they were sent to. And funny enough, in the book of Enoch, the antagonist is not even Satan or Lucifer, you know, and we'll talk about that too if you want to, if we have time. But it's not even Satan, it's Azazel, because he taught magic. He was teaching magic to people, and that was the biggest punishment. While all the angels were raping women and creating the Nephilim, you know.
Wait, explain this. What do you mean angels raping women? What's a Nephilim?
So the archangels, right? There was a group of angels that decided to disobey God and said, hey, you know, God prefers humans. What about us? And they went down and they started sleeping with women, you know, raping the women, and the Nephilim were born from they were born. So these are the children of the fallen angels, right? Azazel didn't actually, funny enough, in the book of Enoch, Azazel didn't touch any woman, but he started teaching humans how to do magic. And that was considered one of the biggest sins. So all the angels started blaming Azazel. Hey, it was, or Amadeus. I can't remember. Please don't quote me on Azazel or Amadeus. It's one of those. This is the freaking A's. Anyway, um, all the angels are like, oh, he was teaching the, witchcraft and sorcery to the humans, so they can, kind of like the book of Prometheus, like the story of Prometheus in the Greek mythology. So, well, anyway, he got punished. He got sent to Sheol, right? The place where all the fallen angels live. And God, as a punishment to all the other fallen angels, it was to kill their children, the Nephilim, the giants, right in front of them so they could suffer. And they were like, no, please don't kill our kids, because they had feelings. They had grown feelings for the kids.
And these kids were giants?
Yeah. And then, you could also compare it to the story of the demigods and all that, right? So yeah, technically that's what hell is for, or Sheol is for. It's a place for the fallen angels. But it's funny how like the antagonist is not even, Satan. It's a whole different angel.
Well, we see so much satanic imagery in pop culture.
Right.
Like an example I make often is this artist I've been a fan of for over a decade, Machine Gun Kelly. I first saw MGK on World Star Hip Hop in 2010. He was a rapper for a long time, and he really made like uplifting, inspiring music. And then he moves to Hollywood. And slowly you start to see this satanic imagery coming through in his branding and in his music videos. And he even commented once, he has this song, The Alpha and Omega, and he's like in a bath of blood. And people started commenting saying like, oh, look, MGK has turned satanic. And he's like, no, it's just art, It's often called art when they do these like satanic imagery. But now he's one of the biggest artists in the world. He was going to name his album Born with Horns. Him and his wife drink each other's blood. And I don't know, it's hot. Well, warm. It's the blood's warm, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you chill it.
Yeah, you could put a little bit of freezing.
Blood ice cubes.
Perfect.
But I just think it's so interesting. And even like, Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, you see with some of the biggest acts in the world, this satanic imagery. And I can't help but think, like, why is that? Why is it that when you get to the highest levels of fame, your art is satanic?
Yeah.
I had Nick Ayala on last episode, and he's a practicing Satanist.
Right.
And I've spoken with Satanists. And those who practice Satanism that I know, it's not like this bloodthirsty, sacrificial thing that gets that it's painted out to be.
Right.
Do you think there's a connection with Satanism and super high levels of fame and notoriety?
That's a really tough one for me to talk about. All right. Let's first get to the historical part, right? And then I'll kind of get more into my spiritual beliefs, right?
Yeah.
So the first part is the word Satan has been perverse throughout history, right? You needed a bad guy, somebody to be the bad guy in the Bible, so they pinned it to Satan. If you talk about the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, before the New Testament came up, the New Testament is where you start to see, oh, Satan's evil, and then all of a sudden, which is really funny, clearly the people who wrote the New Testament didn't read the Old Testament, because when Satan turns into a snake, there's no way that Satan could have been a snake because, in the Garden of Eden, because God clearly punished the snake to crawl in his belly for the rest of his life, and Satan doesn't crawl in his belly, so it's a really interesting thing. But anyway, going back to that, in the Old Testament, you have a Satan and you got the Satan, like the big guy, right? And they function as, they kind of like test humans, right? They're the prosecutors. They're known, Satan literally means the prosecutor or the deceiver, right? And it's all to test. Literally, so in the book of Job, God gathers his council, and in that council, Satan sits in God's council. He's part of God's council, which is funny. And it's interesting because then it's like, wait a minute, I thought Satan wasn't the good guy. So he says, hey, we all know the story. Hey, I see this guy. He says, nothing's ever going to take his faith away, and God says, yeah, go prove him, go test him to make sure he keeps his word, that he's never gonna stop worshiping me, and Satan literally kills his whole family and all that stuff, the whole story, right? And he still worships God, and God says, oh, you see, he still worships me. Cool. But Satan's role was not really, he was not really known as like the evil guy, like the actual, his definition is not even the definition of evil in the Bible, right? He's just a prosecutor and a deceiver, right? He's just there to kind of like deceive you, like get you off your path, see, and he does that to Jesus in the desert. When he's walking for 40 days, 40 nights, he's trying to like be like, show me that you're really strong. And he puts literally like tempts him with food and all this stuff in front of him, all these beautiful like things that would be tempting, and Jesus fights it off and he doesn't let temptation get to him. That's the whole basis of Satan, right?
Temptation.
Right. Something that's going to mislead you to something away from your path, right? In a way, Satan kind of helps you be stronger because he's really just there to be, the whole joke of the devil's advocate. Like, when I say, oh, I want to be the devil's advocate, is to really get you to like step up your game. And that's really all Satan seems to really do. Then you get to the New Testament, and the New Testament was written maybe 1,000 years after the Old Testament. So you have 1,000 years of religions and different ideas being built, and all of a sudden, it's like, well, we need a antagonist. We need the bad guy in there. Well, let's pin it on Satan. He seems to just be deceiving people, But Satan in the actual Hebrew Bible doesn't really do true evil, and at least in my eyes, So, and I will say that very. I don't know. I'm just kind of like saying it in the sense that, hey, at the end of the day, this is more of my opinion.
Yeah.
Because true evil, I mean, we've seen what goes on in this world, literally people killing each other and stuff. So that's like Satan doesn't really do that part, right? So that's where you kind of start to see the name Satan be perverse, right? Now, modern Satanism, it derives from the whole idea of, and again, over the years, you turn something into, you build it into something.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm explaining myself right when I say that. Like,
I think I understand what you're saying. I just find it interesting, and I'm trying to find where it happens when Satan becomes such a big part in like upper echelon of existence.
Yeah.
It seems like we see time and time again all of this quote unquote satanic imagery.
right. Well, now Satan's the bad guy, so we're gonna stick to that story, and now we've given it enough mental energy that, hey, Satan's the bad guy, but he can also give you all these riches and wellness and blah blah blah. So it's all up to your interpretation. But what I always recommend people is, hey, please read your actual history, like your true origins of everything, so you get an understanding of what you're actually worshiping, or what you're actually believing, or what you're actually saying. So you don't come off kind of, I don't know, like you don't build a dogma out of it.
Yeah. I think that, so is it in the teachings that Satan can offer riches and gold?
I guess to a practicing Satanist, yes. But then there's a lot of deities that can do the same. It's just what you choose, what calls to you. And for some people, Satan calls to them.
Yeah. Well, Nick was saying that, we as this in the satanic religion, we actually don't worship Satan.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of like a troll on religions.
Okay.
And that the whole point is like, it's like the anti-religion,
Right.
which I find sometimes is so funny. Like, you get into these groups of people that are like, don't label me as this, but in order to not label me as this, I'm labeled as this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree 100% with you. Now, don't get me wrong, I am a member of the Satanic Temple.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So it is really funny. I love that you said that, because it's very true. For me, it was just more of the whole political aspect of leave the church out of the government. Just
Right.
Let's separate that.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be together. That was my whole thing. That's really why I became a member of it, and also to help people understand the origins of why people view Satan as evil, especially in the Satanic Panic during the 80s. That was a big thing, So I just want to educate people so they don't go around saying, oh, the devil made me do it, Satan made me do it. No, you chose to do it yourself.
Yeah.
You have that freedom to. Even in the Bible, clearly, Satan doesn't force you to do anything. You have the freedom to do whatever you want. So let's not put blames on people. And I think that was the whole philosophy in that whole biblical story as well with Jesus.
Do you believe in free will?
I do. Oh man. Okay. So, there's how many people in this planet?
8 billion.
8 billion, right? So if I choose to do something, right, I have the free will to do something. However, I have to consider that there's 8 billion minds in the world also making a decision, so that can affect an outside aspect of my life. Economically, you have politicians messing with. If I say, okay, I'm gonna dedicate to not spending money, save money, blah blah blah, this and that, but then outside things happen where all of a sudden expenses start to go up, rent, house, mortgages, whatever, electric bills go up. All of a sudden, a guy hits you and you got to spend money on your car, things like that. There's outsource outcomes that happen that also affect your future.
Right, where you wouldn't be able to follow your will. You
Yeah.
have to do what must be done based on the circumstance.
Exactly.
Yeah, but what about like fate and destiny? Do you think these are words that are just like for people who are aloof and like, or do you think there's something to the fact of like a certain path that is your chosen path? When you're on it and you're aligned with it, like the universe gives you feedback that things are going well,
Oh yeah. I mean, if talking spiritually wise, yeah, I do believe there's parts where the universe does kind of guide you. If you want something, and sometimes the universe says, hey, honestly, that's not for you. Example, you meet a girl or a partner, whatever, and you think that person's perfect for you, and
Yeah.
the universe is like, hey, that person's really bad for you, and
Yeah.
the universe is probably gonna step in and guide you to something better. Maybe there is some kind of destiny. Maybe we build our destiny and we say, well, I want this, and the universe says, well, because you wanted this, I'm gonna make sure I guide you through that, but that person's not gonna guide you through that. So could be both ways. I don't have a definite answer for you on that.
I can't help but
It's all
think-
belief at that point.
Yeah, it comes down to what you believe. But I can't help but think that in my life, I've seen when things are going really well, right? It's like I feel like I'm aligned with the path that I'm supposed to be on. And when things start falling apart, I can look at my choices, my free will that I've utilized
Right.
that has led me off path, right? So it's almost like we do have free will to choose which direction we want to go, but the universe will remind you that it's like a video game. Like if
Right.
you're in a game and you start taking the wrong path, like there's way too many obstacles, there's really like challenging things,
Right.
and then when you find the right path, it's like smooth sailing, and I can't help but think that there's something to that. I also get like signs in the form of numerology, which is really interesting.
Right.
Like you've heard of like angel numbers when you
Right.
see 111, 222. I see those often, and it might just happen to be the time I look at the clock,
Right.
but it's not just the clock. For instance, 111 or 1111, I have for years now associated with the presence of my brother who passed away in 2016. And oftentimes we'll be like in a conversation about the forward progression of our life or showing gratitude for how things are going. And in that moment, we'll see 1111. It might not be on the clock. It might be in the odometer on the car. Well, the other night, I did that performance at Renegades, which it was my first time performing in almost 10 years. There was 50 or 60 of us all together. We all had such an incredible time. Well, we're paying to leave. I don't know if I told you this. We're paying to leave. And Danielle's like, babe, look at the tab. And I thought she was saying there was something wrong with our bill.
Right.
Our bill was $111.
Wow.
And for me, like, what are the odds? If we would have gotten one less drink, we had friends who were insisting that they buy a round of drinks. We're like, no, it's on us. If we wouldn't have done that, if there would have been one thing different, that 1111 wouldn't have shown up right there.
Yeah.
And I can't help but think that's like a fucking sign that I'm on the right path or that my brother is there, something like that. Do you have opinion on numbers and how they relate to like the fabric of reality?
Right. I do have two ways I view it. And again, You know, I do have my personal beliefs, and if anybody wants to talk to me about my personal beliefs, you're more than welcome to. It's not something I just like to share very easily, but I will give you two answers. The one is there's always patterns. You do something, there's the ripple effect. Something else is going to happen. So like you said, hey, you know, if we wouldn't have stayed longer or et cetera, that wouldn't have happened. So there is some kind of path going on there, right?
Yeah.
Some kind of pattern. It could definitely, like you said, it could be maybe your brother guiding you, you know, so that's definitely a possibility. And it all comes down to you at that point, you know, what's in your heart, what does your heart tell you?
Right.
The other way I would also view it is psychologically. That number means a lot to you, so you're gonna look for it unconsciously without like even thinking about it. You're gonna look for it, and every time you see it, oh, it just happens.
I attach that meaning to it.
Yeah, because you have to consider how many numbers are out, the possibilities of that number popping up. There's so many numbers. Just walking outside, you're gonna see so many numbers, right? It goes into it falls under the category of Murphy's Law. You know, what can happen, it will happen, you know. So there's gonna be times where, oh, your tab's gonna be X amount, or you're gonna see that number at a light or something, right? So those are my two answers that I can give you. And at the end of the day, it comes down to you, what you choose for you, what you choose for yourself, you know. And I think for me, that's the true definition of being a true spiritualist, you know, a true spiritual person.
Finding your own meaning in your daily happenings.
Yeah, and letting others find it for themselves and not pushing it on others.
Well, a great example of that is one time I'm in the line at Wendy's. I, have to wait a second to get my order taken. And I place my order and I get it back and my tab was 1111.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, 1111. I show the woman in the window and she's like, oh, that's not good. And I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, no, that's like 666. Like, that's not a good thing. She associates 1111 with a bad thing for whatever reason.
Witchcraft, because they see it as witchcraft, and in their religion or their faith, it's and anything that we practice, it's wrong. So it's all on the eye of the beholder.
I watched a YouTube video once about the numbers 1 and 11 and how they're like tied into everything. But I guess if somebody has like a good voiceover track with anybody can make a video that's very believable, right? This is how you get people like these flat earthers, right? Do you think the earth is flat? No. Why is it that there's a large portion of our population in 2022 that is now convinced we live in a flat earth? What is that?
I think it has to do a lot with trust. We know our governments have lied to us in the past. You know, to say that the government was always truthful, you know, it's a big slap in the face. Like, so I think one of the biggest things is that definitely there's no trust in anything that is put on your face anymore, because we don't really know what to believe. We got the whole thing with the vaccine. Nobody wants to take the vaccine because we don't know. And again, you know, whatever you believe, great.
Yeah.
But like I always said, don't push it on people. Don't push your beliefs on people. But we can't even trust the science that is, you know, backed up with the whole thing with the vaccine that supposedly they did research and stuff like that, because we don't trust the governments because of how many times they've lied to us.
Right.
You know, would you trust me if I was always lying to you, if I was going behind your back lying to you, and then
you would actually assume that you're lying to me because you've lied to me before. It's like that phrase that I've said, if you can watch somebody lie to somebody else, it's not if they'll lie to you, it's when, right? So I understand what you're saying is we've become so distrustful in what we think reality is that some people would be willing to think that the earth is flat because it's like, oh yeah, they lied to us about everything else. We live in the Truman
Somebody pulled
Show.
out some kind of information on it, and they're like, you see, these are the facts, the earth is actually flat, et cetera, and then you're like, well, and in a minute somebody on YouTube says the government's lying to us, all of a sudden you're like, yes,
Right.
because you already associated yourself with knowing how many times the government has lied to you.
Right. Well, that's the problem with like not being transparent about things, especially when you have to have faith in the people who are leading us.
Yeah.
That it's hard to believe anything that's said.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But then part of it could be like just disinformation, right? So what if, right, we know there are certain conspiracy theories, quote unquote, that have come out to be true. Right.
It's sad.
And you find out later, like, wait a minute, that was real. So if you wanted to make people if you wanted to discredit somebody, like I'm somebody who is of the belief that, you know, maybe JFK, the killing of JFK was an inside job, right?
Right.
If I also believe the earth is flat, which is so ridiculous, and I'm talking to you about my beliefs about things that are probably real, and then you can group me in with the people of like, yeah, he's a fucking flat earther. Like nothing he says is real. So maybe it's like public disinformation to muddy the water of legitimate conspiracies.
Right.
You know?
Maybe the earth is flat. At that point, you have to question yourself. Maybe the earth is flat and we're being lied to. But at that point, it's one of those things like, what's really the true purpose? You know, it's like, I don't see with that as anybody gaining anything out, you know, lying to us that the earth is actually, it's, you know,
No,
lying
I think
to
it's
us.
to discredit conspiracy theorists.
Oh, I see.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that if you believe that JFK was an inside job and you believe the earth is flat, you're going to think this guy's a fucking moron. He thinks the earth is flat. So everything else he says has to be nonsense, right?
Yep.
So, and that's like the QAnon thing, that like Trump was a fucking messiah sent here to save the world from, you know, satanic fucking, you know, baby eaters.
Right.
You know, it's like, that is fucking ridiculous.
You know that's another thing. One thing that we say in the Satanic Temple is if Christians or, you know, people who believe in spiritual people can do evil in the name of God, then we should be able to do good in the name of the devil. And that hit me really hard because sometimes the people that are claiming to be good are the most corrupt.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah, it's so true. It's so true. That's like what we were saying before, how much massacre has happened in the name of holiness.
Right.
Right. So that doesn't mean that everything in the name of Satan is bad. I understand that.
Yeah.
A minute ago, you mentioned alchemy.
Yeah.
I am very ignorant. My understanding is alchemy is elements, right? Earth, wind, air, fire, water. Is that correct?
Alchemy is
the
pretty
base
much
of
anything
alchemy?
you can put together to build something new, to create something new. The old tradition was to create lead, turn lead into gold. That was the old ways. But there's a whole philosophy into that. You have lead that's associated with the planet Saturn or the god Saturn. Right now, let's not talk about planets. Let's talk them as if they're gods, right? So it's associated with the god Saturn, and gold is the sun, right? We know that Apollo was the sun god, you know, or Helios was the sun god, and the sun is bright. It rises from the east, which the east is associated with knowledge and you know, the element of air, which is the mindset. And Saturn represents that the god, which is Kronos in Greek, that pretty much was so afraid of his kids taking over his throne that he consumed them. So they wouldn't be born. Every time they were born, he would consume them, eat them, so they would never overthrow him. It's that whole idea of coming out from and Saturn was punished to be in Tartarus for eternity, so he's stuck in Tartarus for all his life, for eternity, right? So it's the whole philosophy of coming down from the bottom and growing into the sun, rising like a sun, like shining, right? That's the whole philosophy. But alchemy pretty much derives from anything that well, first the name, it derives from Egypt, alchem, which means from Kemet. You know, Egypt used to be called Kemet back in the day, right? So the Egyptians, they were very involved in blending different herbs to create something, some kind of remedies, etc. So that's where really the whole idea comes from. You know, it's modern chemistry. That's what alchemy is, modern chemistry.
It is.
Right? Yeah.
It is. So, but I hear you tying it with mythology.
Right.
So there's a connection between alchemy and mythology, though.
Fun story. So Isaac Newton, who's one of my favorite
Philosophers,
physicists of the whole, like, he was a big alchemist. I mean, he's the one that, you know, Isaac Newton was the one with the apple falling, gravity, all of that, right? He was an alchemist, secretly an alchemist. He would have been an alchemist during those times. It wouldn't go too well for you. The church would have been on your ass, right? So he was secretly, and you can actually read his journal because it's on the internet, it's online, and it's so awesome. All his notes on alchemy are so fascinating, and I've read them, and everything that's on his notebook literally is everything I've studied, so it's impressive. Well, Isaac Newton took a very famous story. It's about Mars and Venus. In the whole idea is that Mars and Venus were secret lovers. They were attracted to each other, but Venus was forced to marry Vulcan. You know, some kind of deal that Zeus or Jupiter, however you want to call him, made, an arrangement that he made. So Venus didn't love Vulcan. Vulcan was an ugly god. He was not a very attractive god. He was the god of the forge, the fire, all that. So of course they meet it secretly, and they're doing their thing in bed, whatever. Hephaestus or Vulcan realizes this, creates a net. He forges a net, like a metal net. So then they go back and they meet again, and the net traps them, and little lips them, and they're both naked, like hanging, and he calls all the gods to look and humiliate them, right? Now, how does that tie into alchemy? Well, Venus is associated with Mercury. No, I'm sorry, copper. Well, my apologies on that. Venus is associated with copper, and Mars is associated with iron. And Vulcan is fire, the forge, right? So what he did was he took copper and iron, melted them together, binded it together at like extreme heat. He associated that story. And what he came up with, it's an alloy called the net. You can Google this. That's the name, the net. And it literally looks, the alloy looks in the shape of a net. Like it has like little octagons and all that stuff around it. So it looks like a net, right? So it's taking all these stories that have some kind of truth. And that's where I was going back with the whole biblical story. It has some truth. It has allegory. It's all allegorical. It tells you something to represent something bigger, right? Not to take it literal. And that's what Isaac Newton literally did. He took this story, and mind you, this knowledge has been passed around for ages, generations, years, so it's just like the origins of it, it's unknown, it's very unclear. They only call it alchemy from Kemet because of like some of the ties to ancient Egypt, but the true teachings of it, it's really unknown. It's hard to really say where it comes from.
The ties of our world to ancient Egypt is so wild. We go back to talking about how these pyramids were built, and about it's like that civilization had a understanding of the way the world worked in tandem with the universe.
Right.
Far better than we know now.
Right.
I don't know if it was you and I that talked about, maybe you told me this, about the Great Pyramid of Giza, its latitude and longitude. Those numbers put together are the same exact to the digit of the speed of light.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. That wasn't me.
Yeah.
I know that they were
what are the odds of
back
that?
in ancient times. They were perfectly aligned with Orion's belt, the 3 stars.
I have this weird connection with Orion's belt. At times in my life when I've looked to the sky just for solace, there's Orion looking down on me, awesome. And I don't know what that's about.
He was a hunter.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in love with I'm gonna say Atlanta because the Roman god. I can't believe. Wow, the Greek one, the hunters, the twin sister of Apollo. What? Do you know which god I'm talking about? I completely forgot this. I'm disappointed in myself.
I don't know. I'm trying to look up
Artemis. So there's a few stories that they were lovers, and Apollo's jealous because Apollo was jealous of his twin sister having a lover, not giving him attention. He tricked her into killing him, and in order to keep him alive, she created him into the constellation.
Sorry, I'm looking up this thing about the Great Pyramid of Giza because I wanted to. Oh, of course, Snopes pops up, and it's some fucking fact check shit. Like, it's nothing more than coincidence, is what it says. Okay, the latitude of the pyramid in decimal degrees can match a sequence of numbers expressing the speed of light if you look hard enough for it, but that phenomenon is nothing more than coincidence. Says who? Snopes says this is false. Yeah, I don't. Fuck off, Snopes.
I mean, the fact that it's coincidence, really, that's a very nice coincidence.
Come on.
Like, let's be honest. And I was talking about the whole thing with Murphy's Law, but let's be honest. That's too much to the T-point.
Here we go. This is on express.co.uk. Revealed. Great Pyramid of, is it Giza?
Giza.
Giza. Has this in common with the speed of light. Ancient Egyptians knew even more about the universe than academics believed. With the coordinates of the Great Pyramid of Giza matching the speed of light. The exact coordinates of the Great Pyramid of Giza are 29.0 0.9792458 north, which by itself means very little. However, some enthusiasts have noticed the number is exactly the same of the speed of light, which is 299,792,458 meters per second. It's exact to the digit. I don't know what that means, right? But what are the odds of that are like 1 in a trillion.
It's amazing, right? I do, and again, I do believe there's some stuff that are really unique, and that's very, it's too much of a coincidence for it not to be true, you know. But going back to alchemy, I want to actually share this one too. The main concept of alchemy, right? You have the three main elements, which is mercury, sulfur, and salt, right? And I'm going to first explain what each one means, and then you're going to see how they're related to the Holy Trinity. But, you know, it's the three main elements that are found in metals, and each one will have different... Oh, that's the element of water.
Yeah, but the necklace is supposed to be the Holy Trinity, so I'm interested to hear more about this.
Yeah, so the idea is that each metal contains these three elements. Each one will have different ratios on either salt or sulfur or mercury, and it's what creates that metal to be unique, right? Whether it's going to be silver or gold or etc., right? It's what makes the metal unique. So, however, when you look at it in a philosophical aspect, mercury represents spirit, sulfur represents the soul, and salt represents the body, right? And it's the idea that nothing cannot exist without these three aspects. So, I'm going to explain real quick. This is a book, right?
Yep.
This is mercury.
Pages, paper.
Right. And this is a book. And that's spirit. That's mercury, right? Spirit, right? It's the fact that it's a book. We know that it's a book. We understand what a book is, and it exists as a book, right? Now, what makes it unique, this book from this book, it's the soul. It's the properties, the unique personality traits, all that stuff, right?
Interesting.
And then salt, which is the body, is that we can touch it physically.
Interesting.
So then you got in the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, right? So the name of the Father, which is the soul, the mind, right? And the Son, which is the body, which God came to, in the Bible, God came as a man, and the Holy Spirit, which is divine. It's, Spirit is the purest thing, the purest form that exists.
So what you're saying is, so the Holy Trinity, I've always thought about that in Christianity and Catholicism, but there's also ties to alchemy there.
Yeah, the Holy Trinity didn't exist until the King James Version. The Holy Trinity, it's a concept after King James. It's not even in the original Hebrew text or the Greek text, nothing. So it's not literally... Even the idea of Lucifer didn't exist. Lucifer doesn't exist in the Bible until King James Version, right? So there's a lot of things that were added, and that's where you start to see the dogma. However, you have to consider, where are these people getting all these ideas from? And obviously, we know people in those times knew a lot more about esoteric teachings that were trying to put into religion and creating into religion, and that's how you grab different aspects, and that's how you build a brand new religion, right? So and literally, you want to research anything about the original Hebrew or Greek text, it's not going to talk anything about the Holy Trinity. So it's very fascinating.
So it was a Christian thing, but
they grabbed it from more ancient concepts, more ancient ideas.
Yeah, and then at what point did it become associated with salt and mercury and sulfur?
Way longer than that. There's so much research done on this, and we don't know where did it originate from, but we know all these teachings have been taught way before, maybe during the ancient Egyptian times, with the times of the Egyptian gods, the Greek gods, Norse gods, all of that.
I just think it's so fascinating that, and what's interesting also is, like, if you weren't going and collecting these books and digging into this knowledge, like, you could go your entire life without knowing any of this stuff that's like an integral part of like thousands and thousands of years of existence, right? But it seems like people don't want us to know,
because it's all a beautiful philosophy that really frees your mind. I mean, you have to consider the first governments with the church. If you had that kind of free thinking, you're going to execute it. Why are they executing? Because they don't want you to tell the people what's really going on, how false all this stuff, that these are just allegories, and they're beautiful. Don't get me wrong. They're beautiful allegories, but when you read those fucked up parts of the Bible, they're also tied to cultural aspects. In certain cultures, the woman did not have any dominant power over the man, etc., etc. So you still have that whole bias aspect, So
Do you think the Bible was created to control people?
no, the Bible was created. Okay, let me rephrase that. The original aspect of the Bible, the original purpose of the Bible was to teach philosophy, a philosophy of a God, trying to give, I guess, in a way,
Purpose.
personify a God, right?
Okay.
Yeah, give it purpose, give a whole entire life a meaning, right?
Yeah.
So that was I know they were called the Esenians, and they were so dedicated to rewriting these texts over and over to have copies of them and study. They were like the monks of the ancient times. Don't quote me exactly where it is, because I this is the part where my brain starts to. I have a whole magazine on it of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and doing research on the Dead Sea Scrolls will give you a lot of enlightenment on this. But that was the original purpose. It was a philosophy. It was very sacred. It was meant to be taken as a teaching. How can you grow and learn from it? And it had a lot of, wordings that it could mean so many things, and it's up to you to decipher what it does really mean. You get the times of Constantine, and Constantine, before he created Christianity, you have records of him, his journals, his generals, people close to him talked about how he literally believed he was the reincarnation of the god Apollo, the sun god. So he was trying to create something that would personify the sun god, and then we got Jesus Christ. Literally, when you think about the sun, the sun god is Apollo. He's the son of, literally the direct son of the sky god, right? So he's the sun, he's the enlightened being, he's the direct descendant of the sun god, etc., etc. You got the same thing with Jesus. He's the son of the sky god. Whether you call it Zeus or Elohim or Adonai, whatever, right? Also, the whole story of the wine, where Jesus, turning water into wine, derives from Bacchus or Dionysus, right? Dionysus was the god of the vine, not alcohol. I want to make that very clear, because you know how you mentioned hallucinations and all stuff?
Yeah.
Right? So there were some, they believe some plants were actually that was some way that they would make the wine actually made people hallucinate rather than getting drunk. So he's also the god of ecstatic, being all ecstatic and going in a frenzy and state of mind and stuff like that. So that's what Bacchus, that's how you celebrate Bacchus. But he was the son of Zeus, the sky god again, but he was the one born of a mortal woman and still became a god, right? So he eventually did become a god. He was honored so well because the way he presented himself around people honored him and followed him. So Zeus was like, hey, you can come into my Parthenon, right? So then you got two aspects there, where you can kind of see similarities. And then you also have the god Horus, which is the same concept. It's one eye taken away by his uncle Set. He goes through all these trials and all stuff, gets sacrificed, and he eventually becomes the ultimate sun god as well. I mean, Ra is the sun god, the Egyptian sun god, but he becomes like the high being, and he was born of a virgin mother as well.
What is that, born of a virgin mother? Actually, hold that thought real quick. You want an ice water?
Yes, please.
Well, what did I just ask?
Born of a virgin mother.
Yeah, what is that? What is the fascination with Immaculate Conception?
So the whole thing with let's go to the Egyptian Isis, right? She's the mother of Horus, right? Osiris lost his penis. His brother Set killed him, chops him in pieces, and throw him all over the Nile. And he asked Hathor to help him recover his husband, and they couldn't find a penis.
Like some Lorena Bobbitt shit.
Right? So it's funny because Isis remains a virgin goddess, and she's the mother of Horus. So what Hathor does is she takes the essence of Isis and wraps herself around Osiris and gets pregnant with Horus. But however, even though Hathor, which is really funny if you think about it, Hathor is carrying the baby, she's not the mother of Horus, because it still has the DNA of the god of the dead, the embalming, which that's really Osiris, right? And you have Isis, who's technically still a virgin mother, but she's the mother of Horus, But if you think about it, it's funny. Hathor was carrying the baby for Isis, which we do it now in modern times.
Right, surrogacy.
Yeah, so how did the ancients knew about this concept? Somebody else carrying your baby, it's a really fun one.
I wonder if part of it is talking about like if you're the son of God, right? And I think they say like, you know, the word fuck is like fornication under
Right.
consent of the king. Fornication was like considered maybe a sin. So
Right.
for a holy entity to enter this world in the form of a man, maybe they don't want to depict that as having come from a quote unquote sinful act.
Right. I mean, there's also that thought that maybe the Virgin Mary actually did have a baby before getting married, and she could have been killed, and you know. But then also it goes into how do you explain Jesus actually being divine and doing all these miracles and stuff like that. And I'm not saying I believe in the Christian faith, but then that part of the story also would have, you know, if it matches with the idea that Jesus was divine, then technically that does mean the Virgin Mary had to have been, you know, a virgin, immaculate.
A conception.
Yeah.
So all of these parables, thank you so much, babe. You're the best. You look so good. Love you.
True love right there.
Cheers, brother. Figured we'll hydrate a little bit, right?
Yes.
What was I gonna say? Immaculate Conception. Oh, okay. In the Bible, there's all these parables, right? All these stories that some people take very literally. Other people say, like, no, these are stories to get you to understand a concept,
Yes.
right? Do you think Jesus was a real person?
To an extent, I think he was based on a real person. Do I think he was based on Jesus? Like, did Jesus? No. I think he was definitely based on maybe many people, many persons. And I'll give an example of that. I think there were during those times you start to see people come out and preach, kind of like in modern world, we got all these gurus trying to, you know, express the truth. But in some of the texts that were later discovered in Egypt, you have the New Testament, and they were older than the manuscripts that the Catholic Church had. You do have where was I going with this? So
Do you think Jesus was a real person?
okay, sorry.
That's
So-
okay.
So, you know, you find these older texts, and you got the book of Matthews where Jesus is literally preaching all these things that you would have surprised you. He literally there was one phrase that he literally says, you know, the kingdom of heaven is not a place, but rather within you. You know, so it means heaven is it's within you. It's not an actual physical place. And he states that very clearly. So that was very fascinating to me. So I think it's
Kind of contradictory to what most
Christians
people believe.
Yeah. So, you know, that's where I go and say, hey, you know what? I think Jesus was just some kind of based on many gurus trying to give freedom of expression, you know, freedom of thought. And maybe that's why the idea of him getting executed is so meaningful. You know, the king is the one that executes it's the higher ups that execute him because he's preaching blasphemy.
It is a very like tragically beautiful story. There's that Passion of the Christ movie. Have you seen that?
That was designed to really manipulate. I'm sorry.
You think so?
That's designed to get people to follow that faith, you know. And
You think it was a form of religious propaganda?
yeah, because the best way to get somebody is through messing with your emotions. If I can get you to cry and all of a sudden feel these things, then all of a sudden you start to say, hey, Rod is telling the truth, and you know, you start to believe everything I tell you, and you start to follow me and trust me, and now I'm your leader.
Interesting. And it's a great point, because watching that movie, you know, because the movie magic has a way of, in your mind, sometimes it's hard to distinguish between reality and fiction, and especially if a movie is done really well. Like that, the story in that movie is just incredible. And it's like, if you were to remember that, like, that's how you can envision it actually happening. But you're saying it was more of a form of like
They went
mental
a little
manipulation.
exaggerated with the way they were whipping him and with the sharp edges, all stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it's just, you know, you mentioned something, movie magic. Oh, this is okay. So you know the whole thing with Hollywood. That Hollywood, it's a kind of branch that was assigned to make magic wands and stuff like that, right?
No.
Oh, you didn't know about that? I thought it was you
So
that
the term Hollywood.
it derives from an actual branch that technically was designed to, you know, in ancient Greek, it was designed to build a wand and was used as a magical tool, right? So it's the magic of movies. However, fun fact, we spoke about Dionysus earlier. The Hollywood actually also derives from Dionysus, as he's the god of the theater. You know, so one of his vines is the Hollywood, and that he is the god of the vine. So the one of the vines that he creates, he grows, it's called a Hollywood. So that whole thing with Hollywood and the sign and all that stuff is associated technically to the god Dionysus because he's also the god of theater, not just the god of wine or the wine or.
So I'm so interested in like the meaning behind like a lot of words that we use, and like we think of, when you hear the term Hollywood, you think of movies,
California,
right? It says here on treepeople.org, how did Hollywood get its name? Legend has it that early residents of Southern California were so inspired by a lovely holly-like bush that they were inspired to call their new digs Hollywood. It's easy to see why the legend spread, even if it wasn't true. What is the true meaning of Hollywood? Characteristic people in the motion picture industry. Yeah, of course, this is like more of like a watered down. Who made up the name Hollywood? Harvey Wilcox, father of Hollywood. Also purchased land. I want to find that Holly wand that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Have you heard about like how tied into movies the CIA is?
Explain.
So there's a portion of Hollywood. There are like 100 and something CIA agents on the payroll of these big movie production companies.
Wow.
And they do it under the guise of they're there to make sure that information is like, if you're going to do a movie on spies or whatever, that they're getting like real information to make the movie more believable, right? But there's this thing called what was that act, or the CIA did, oh shit, it's a program that the CIA did to use media as public mind manipulation.
Right.
CIA program to control minds through Hollywood. I got to think of the name of this. MK Ultra was one. Mind control. CIA's quest for mind control. Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird.
Right.
This is all released through the Freedom of Information Act, that the CIA's plan with film was to manipulate people's minds.
Wow.
You know, and they say that, they stopped doing that. But man, if you watch, it's like what you said with the Passion of the Christ. Like how much of what we see
Propaganda, all that.
is propaganda.
You know, speaking of that, there's a movie that's coming out. You remember the movie Get Out?
Is it a Tyler? It's not Tyler Perry. What are these?
I know.
The two comedians. They
No.
do.
It was a horror movie.
Yeah, but one of them is a comedian.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. Key and Peele. It's
Okay,
one-
okay.
Right? It's
Yeah.
Key or it's Peele who made that
Right.
movie. Okay, Get Out. I'm familiar.
So there's a movie coming out. I forgot what it's called now, but just Google it. It's with Jenna Ortega. Just Google which movie Jenna Ortega is going to be in it. But it's about Hispanics getting all of a sudden, new presidents elected, and he's like the super redneck cowboy with the cowboy hat president, and he wants to deport every single immigrant, every single Hispanic, whether they're legally here or whatever. And instead, they put him in this kind of like asylum. They all grouped them all together, and it is the funniest thing because it's a horror movie because apparently they're doing some kind of experiment to all these people that they are putting in this place. And there's one scene that really cracked me up because this Dominican guy. Dominicans tend to be a little bit more dark skinned. They do descend from African Americans. So you have more the darker tone skin, right? But so he tells this girl, "Hey, you're a white girl. You should be able to get out of here easily." And the girl responds in Spanish, and she says, "Soy Argentina, boludo." Like fuck you, I'm from Argentina, right? But it's like the movie was kind of like almost like a propaganda, like saying, "Hey, Hispanics can be like this, and all Hispanics are in danger. If we get a president like this, it's putting that fear. And I'm Hispanic, so for me, I laughed. I'm like, what are they trying to do? Like trying to get people to be against cops and the government and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're treating Hispanics wrong. It's like that's literally what I got from the movie, trying to create some other form of fear to show
It's
to
something
people.
I learned years ago, to think about who is funding the creation of this piece of media, right? Often you can watch something and you can see it leans a certain direction. And then if you kind of dig into the people who created it, you can see like, oh, there was a goal in how people would think after watching this.
Yeah.
You know?
Did you ever see Eyes Wide Shut?
It's been a long time
So
since I've seen it.
this is a fun one. And this is the part where I'm going to say, please don't take what I'm about to say as truth, because I don't even know myself on that. I don't even know for myself in this part. A couple of years ago, I did like a little get together with a group of brothers from the lodge, right? And one of the brothers says, hey, can I invite this person? He's not a Freemason, but he's a member of the Illuminati.
What?
And we're all kind of like, well, we hear a lot about this in the lodge itself. We hear the topics of the Illuminati all the time, right? So we're like, yeah, we're curious. Please bring him in. So the guy, he comes in. He's like a millionaire, and he owns I don't know how many properties in California, huge houses. He was in the film industry. I can't even remember his name, but he was talking about the movie Eyes Wide Shut, and he's like, did you guys ever even pay attention to that movie? And we're like, we got to rewatch it again. And, just like you said, I haven't seen it in a while. So I rewatched it, and I was just trying to put the pieces together, and I didn't get it until, there were some things that the guy explained to me. That house where he goes, for the party where they're all wearing masks.
Yeah.
That house actually belongs to one of the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers. It's in the actual property where they filmed that movie at. And when he comes in, there's two people, a male and a female. Obviously, they're all wearing masks, and they all look at Tom Cruise, which was the actor, and they all like nod at him as, kind of like saying, hey, those are the Rockefellers, the two main, like the husband and the wife, kind of like doing that, right? Like low-key kind of like telling us that, right? So he goes in, and, they had the ritual where they hire all these prostitutes, and they all get naked, and there's like this huge carpet. I believe it was like a blue carpet or red carpet, I don't remember, under the floor. And it's kind of funny because, getting deeper into the occult, you learn some things that you do in ritual work where there's usually a pentagram underneath that, right? So he goes and talks about how there is a pentagram underneath the carpet. And what he's doing is he's possessing all these prostitutes with spirits. The priest that's walking around. So the rich people can have like their orgy parties, and it's like an offering to the gods, and they're pretty much saying, hey, they're telling God, I'll let you possess me so you can feel human pleasures if you do this for me, kind of like a trade-off. So then all of a sudden you have all these rich people that lead all stuff, and it's in a movie. Everybody's just having sex and all this whatnot, and obviously they're so secret about it. There's executions that happen. You don't really know if somebody got killed for speaking. Like, it was really interesting when he explained all that to me. And of course, learning later on about magic, there is something called sex magic, where you do allow a specific spirit to possess you, so you can have a specific pleasure, and then the moment of climax, you're focusing on that intention that you want and asking that spirit to help you, and after that the spirit leaves you and says thank you, and
What?
we'll do you a favor. Yeah.
Holy
That's what
shit.
sex magic really is. You're allowing a spirit to possess you so they can feel pleasure, and then you ask for something in return.
Do you think that guy was really part of the Illuminati?
It's hard to say, man. It was really tough. Like, I never heard from him again. I'm sure I can still reach out to my brother who talks to him. He swears by it. Obviously, as a brother to another brother, we're not going to lie to each other. But
Yeah.
it's also as far as my brother from the lodge can know as well.
Now, you say that in the Masonic Lodge, you guys often talk about the Illuminati.
It's a fun topic because we believe there are branches. We believe there are branches of the Illuminati within the Freemasons.
You do believe that?
I don't want to say I believe it. There's just conversations that have been brought up. One of them is through the York Rite, and it's a branch of Freemasons. So you go through different rites. You have the York Rite, Scottish Rite, the Shriners, etc., right? And I chose to do the York Rite because I wanted to learn more about the esoteric aspect of Christianity, because it's fascinating to me. And that's where you kind of come into the old Knight Templars teaching, and the ritual work for it was amazing, phenomenal. Like, if I were to tell you what I did, you would be like, where your jaw dropped, like, you actually did that, you guys do that, and it's so cool. It's fascinating. But it is so much information being thrown at you, right? And it is believed that if you can grow and put a lot of dedication, eventually you have the potential to be recruited by the Illuminati within the York Rite. Because,
Really?
yeah, that's one of the rumors. Do we know if it's true? We don't know if it's true.
I can't help but think that there's something there. You know,
Sure.
there's these ties with secret societies and Skull and Bones and Harvard, like you know, these what's Ivy League colleges. You know, like all sorts of crazy shit comes out of Harvard.
Right.
Right? Where these Skull and
Yeah.
Bones exist. Like so
yeah.
Facebook was born from Harvard, right? And they come out with this movie, The Social Network, and they make it like this cute thing, how this guy like comes up with an algorithm on his window or whatever.
Right.
But how much of that is propaganda? Like I can't help but think that, you know, this social network that now can be used to overthrow governments was accidentally created by a kid in his dorm room that
Right.
happened to be at Harvard, where all these secret societies are. Not only that, but even with the COVID thing, there was
Okay, fun one. Sorry to cut you off on the
No,
COVID
that's
thing.
okay.
When I went back to the lodge, because I did tell you I got kicked out, and then I asked to be, welcome back. So I had to sign a petition,
Did you
and they
get
had to
kicked
vote.
out because you wouldn't join the Illuminati?
No, I wish. That would have been fun. No, I just got irresponsible and stopped showing off and stuff, like showing myself.
Okay.
Like I didn't show any more interest, so they were like, okay. Anywho, when I went back in, there was a few brothers that were kind of talking. They were telling me about how, like, hey, just FYI, do not take the vaccine, do not do it. Whatever you do, just don't do it. And then you do have some that took it anyway, but it's just funny the large amount. And there was one that's a doctor, and he was like, dude, just don't fucking take that shit.
Really?
Yeah.
What
So
do they know?
And you got to consider these are men that are in high positions in life, doctors, lawyers, all the stuff, and they're all coming to you and telling you, dude, just don't fucking take it. Whatever you do, save yourself. Like, don't fucking take it. So I'm sure we're gonna probably, when you post this on YouTube, they're probably
Get
gonna
kicked off, get it
fucking-
removed, which is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
can't we have an opinion or at least have a discussion?
Yeah.
When you're in the Masonic Temple, is that what it's called?
The Masonic Lodge.
The lodge.
Yeah.
Is the air palpable with thousands of years of tradition? Do you like feel it that you are part of something that has
Yeah. And this is the part where, a lot of brothers may kind of be like, oh, now you're getting into like the whole conspiracy stuff, or, some of them are really big into conspiracy, so they enjoy that. I'm going to probably get a backlash from this one from brothers, and if they ever see this, if any brother ever sees this. But yeah. So funny enough, for me, when I first joined the Freemasons, there's a lot of ritual work, and a lot of has to involve how the planets rotate, the solar system, the astral world. That's really what it represents. Also, they use a lot of philosophy from the Old Testament, not the New Testament, but the Old Testament, and different origins of different religious beliefs and spiritual beliefs. But the ritual works are phenomenal. They can take up to maybe like an hour to 2 hours, depending. And one of them actually took a whole day, which was really nice. But the dedication and the mental energy that they put into this, there's no way that stuff is not affecting you directly, in the sense that you're feeling that energy kick in. And I remember during those times when I was very active, I felt like my life was going way faster, like in the sense that I like success was just coming to me like this, and every time I would show up and we would do the open initiation, opening the lodge, closing the lodge, all that stuff, it's really you become, in a sense, low key, you become a star. Because we are supposed to represent, even some lodges you go in, and I can talk about this openly because you can go visit some lodges, and the ceiling will look like a whole entire like solar system or sky or something, because that's what we're supposed to represent, a celestial being. We're supposed to become a celestial being, So it's really fascinating. It's really intriguing, and you do gain some sense of this. For me, at least, and I'm speaking personally, I don't know what other brothers will say, but for me, it do get some sense of like this very powerful vibe coming in, like this high, like, oh, I'm feeling.
you're connected with something that's bigger than all of us.
Yeah. Like
Now, does the Masonic Brotherhood, is it documented how far that goes back?
So the earliest we got is the 1700s, the Grand Lodge of England. However, we do have secret writings, and this is a fun one. This is a little bit more of a historical aspect. We got the Knight Templars sometime in the 1100s, right? And then in the 1300s, the Knight Templars became so powerful. They had military, they had properties. They started as simply guiding people in and out of Jerusalem. escorting people in and out of Jerusalem, protecting them from the Muslims and all that. You know how this war, the Crusades, all that has been going on for years. And they become so powerful because people start to pay them in gold, land. All of a sudden, the church is hiring them for protection, all the stuff, and all of a sudden, you got King Philip of France. I want to say it's King Philip of France. Yeah, and Pope Clement V. And I know the name because Pope Clement V. I don't fucking like Pope Clement V. I'm sorry. Anywho, Pope Clement V goes up to the king of France and says, "Hey, man, these guys are becoming even more powerful than you." And the whole thing is the Templars wanted to build a perfect country. So rumors is that they also wanted to expose the church for its faults, how false it is, how fake it is, because the legend goes that they discovered these old texts in the ruins of King Solomon's temple. So they had a lot of stuff. So of course, this is where the famous Friday the 13th comes from. It was Friday the 13th. A whole bunch of Templars get arrested in France. At that point, the Grand Master Jacques de Molay was the leader of the Templars. He willingly tells all the other brethren, "Hey, let's go in peace. Let's not fight back." They get arrested. They get tortured. They're forced to say that they're worshiping the Baphomet. They're worshiping spitting on the cross and having sexual orgies within themselves and all this stuff. But mind you, they're being tortured.
Right.
So they're forced to say all these things. So, fun fact, you can actually Google this in history. This is my favorite one because this is impressive. When Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake, he says, within a year, both of you will die. And exactly within a year, both King Philip and Pope Clement died of diseases. Jacques de Molay was still burned at the stake. And that same night, Friday the 13th, maybe about 300 ships disappeared and all the gold was gone. What happened to that gold in those ships? What comes later in history? Well, we know that they ended up going somewhere to Spain. They became the Knights of Christ or something like that. And others, we don't know where they went. We don't know what happened to that gold. We believe they landed in Canada, and because there's a lot of monuments that are way older than when Columbus first came in Canada. There's these structures, right? And we know they're either Viking or something. We don't know where they originated from, but they could have been Templar. They built all these monuments to protect the gold. There's a lot of rumors. There's just a lot of treasure in Canada. But they did go all over the place. One famous place is Switzerland, because when you look at the flag of the Templar, it's a white flag with a red cross. Switzerland is the inverted. It's the red flag with a white cross. So we believe the Templars actually helped create Switzerland, what we now know as Switzerland. Switzerland is the greatest banks. I forgot to miss something. I've missed something. The Templars basically invented the bank. They were the first creators of the bank. How they did it? You deposit money to them. You can go to England or Spain, France, whatever, and say, and they'll give you a receipt and say, "Oh, I got this much in a bank. I would like to take this out." They will revise the receipt for you, etc. So that's how they were becoming powerful. They were the inventors of the bank, really
controlling the flow of money.
Yeah. So, of course, now we know Switzerland is like one of the greatest countries. The bank's the most powerful. They don't just let anybody else, and they technically created the perfect country. So that's the rumor. That's something that was taught to me in the lodge, that there's a possibility that the Templars created Switzerland. Other Templars, however, you later on start to see in history. Let's go a little bit more, okay, so it was the 1300s that they got executed. Let's give it 300 years later. 300 years later, you start to see something very famous, and it's the famous Jolly Roger, right? The Jolly Roger actually represents
the pirate.
Yeah. So where these ships went off to, so all of a sudden you have the whole idea of the treasure hunt and all that stuff. And there's a famous, and you know what? I will tell you so you can at least post it on the comments because I forgot his name. But he was a famous privateer that got hung for piracy, and he wrote a letter explaining where he hid the treasure. The letter was in code. And that code only the Freemasons know.
No.
So how do we know? Because it took a Freemason to actually decode it. And then we found the treasure.
Dude, the length of history of the Freemasons and how it is so intertwined with the progression of our existence is it's unbelievable. So you're talking about the Knights Templar. Nice save.
Yeah.
Knights Templar starting in the 1100s. So we're talking over 1,000 years ago.
Yep. So you do see, here's some of my stuff. I want to show you this. Just to kind of, you can get an idea how we kind of function and we kind of think. I don't know if I can zoom into the
Would
camera.
I ever be able to go with you to see a lodge?
Yeah, you can definitely come with me. You can go to some of our open events.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
I would love that.
yeah. You're more than welcome to. If I ever have any events where they're doing like a barbecue, you're gonna see a lot of just, it is the South, so you're gonna see a lot of like brothers that are very like into country music and
Yeah.
stuff. So, but if you go more northern states, obviously like New York, where they got the Grand Lodge, you're gonna see a different culture and within the brotherhood. So it's really interesting. I
What do you
I don't know
have
if I
here?
can show this to the camera.
Let's see. Let's give it a try.
Show this page. That's the Masonic code book. Let me know if you can read that. Yeah, maybe you can read it like that. Anywho, the reason why I'm showing you that.
So it's a little bit out of focus in that video. So what I'm looking at here is 2 pages with 35. Does it continue?
Yeah, it continues.
Oh my gosh. This is like a way to decipher things?
Yeah.
I'm probably not allowed to read this.
I don't want you to hold it too long.
Yeah.
And technically I can't really get in trouble for showing you this because it's all cipher, so you can't read it, right? So I'm not telling you any secrets of Freemasonry. The secrets are all kept in here.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Like you hear about like code and deciphering and stuff in like spy movies and stuff, but I mean this is like literature that a part of your brotherhood that's been used for thousands of years. So that's so you could write a secret message?
Yeah. We can literally write a secret message to each other, and if I'm in trouble or something, I can literally there's signs that we can do to say, "Hi, I'm in trouble," and only Freemasons will catch it and they'll be like, "Oh, he's in trouble. We gotta go help him out or something." There's secret ways we communicate without people seeing us.
Do you ever come across stuff in existence where you're like, holy shit, that's a Masonic code?
Yes, I do. I have met a couple of brothers traveling, and I just catch them even in the airplane. And I just, only because they either have it tattooed, but I'm not going to approach them and be like, hey, I'm a Freemason too. No, there's a
Right.
way we have to approach each other. It's not just like, hey, I'm a Freemason, I'm Rod. No.
Is there a secret handshake?
There's a secret handshake. There's
Really?
a secret language. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Now, would the language sound like just a regular English sentence?
It sounds like we're just having a normal conversation. You
but
wouldn't
there's
even
hidden
realize.
messaging in the conversation.
Yeah, you wouldn't even realize what's going on. You would be like, oh, they're just having a normal conversation. And the conversation has nothing to do with, hey, I'm a Freemason, you're a Freemason.
Right.
No, the conversation sounds so normal that you're not even realizing that two Freemasons just met.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Dude, your knowledge about mythology and alchemy and religion is it's really incredible, man. And to be able to learn from you and just hear some of the insider stuff about such a long running tradition of masonry or Freemasonry, it's awesome, man. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
I know you're so passionate
We
about
pride
it.
ourselves in doing research and learning the true meaning of everything that has been put in front of us throughout
Yeah.
history.
Dude, thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing
thank
all
you.
this, brother. I love
Appreciate
you
it.
so much.
Can I just say that we originally were gonna try to roast each other halfway through?
That's why at the beginning I called him Rob.
Yeah, we're just trying to roast, and it just
Well, there's just so much cool shit to talk about, So we can do a roast one next time. 50 episodes.
okay. Well, I was gonna say the 63 episode. Since my math is so perfect.
Yes, yeah, we'll be on the 67th, right? That'll be the perfect number.
Yeah, perfect number.
Rod, I love you, bud, and
Love you
thank you
too,
so
man.
much for sharing.
For sure.
If people want to learn more about what you like to share or get to know you, should they find you on social media?
Yeah, they can find me on Roddy Rod.
Roddy Rod. We
Yeah.
just did a potty pod with Roddy Rod. I'll share your Instagram in the description below. And I just appreciate you so much.
Yeah,
This has
for
been
sure.
awesome, dude.
Yeah, likewise, man.
Cool.
Cool, brother.
Oh yeah, Bula. I'm out. I think it might be against it might be bad
water?
juju. No, to cheers with it, nothing in the glass.
Oh.
We'll do a shell after this.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Sounds good, brother.
You guys, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. If you like what you heard, like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you follow Rod. He's fucking brilliant. Tons of fun. And we'll see you next time live from Hakuna. Hakuna. Where are we? Is this Hakuna?
I'm pretty sure it's Hakuna.
Hakuna Makava.
Perfect.
Appreciate you guys. See you next time. Later.